Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling. Today we're bringing back Superstar Spotlight, and this time we're going to talk about a man who I felt was kind of underrated in a lot of respects, and a lot of fans feel that maybe he's being too bitter and jealous, because maybe he wasn't as good as he perceived himself to be. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Bob Holly. You'd better know him as Hardcore Holly. And Bob Holly was actually somebody I met 10 years ago at Legends of the Ring in 2015. And despite what people say about him, he's actually a really nice guy, and he took the time to answer my questions. He let me hold his belt while I got my photograph taken with him. And what else? Yeah, I remember asking him about his last appearance in WWE. I'm kind of going out of order here, but be that as it may. It was Night of Champions of 2008, where he and Cody Rhodes, the World Tag Team Champions on Raw at the time, were scheduled to defend their gold against Ted DiBiase Jr., who debuted that night, and a mystery partner of his choosing. Well, lo and behold, that mystery partner turned out to be none other than Cody Rhodes. Cody's hair was so dark back then. Then it got kind of lighter, and now it's so blonde. So he was so young and kind of scrawny looking. So anyways, Cody turned on Bob Holly halfway through the match with a DDT. And I think we saw then DiBiase tagged in DiBiase. DiBiase finished him off with Dream Street. And then we had new World Tag Team Champions. Those are my favorite belts, of my favorite variations of the World Tag Team titles. The red ones used on Raw from 2002 to 2010. Love to get my hands on that someday. If anybody knows anyone that has it, let me know. Anyways, yeah, and the funny thing about it is Bob never got his revenge. He wasn't on Raw the next night or the next week. Wasn't seen on TV for months. And ever again, actually, because he got released in January of 2009. Just like that. So what Bob told me was it was a creative decision. They just felt there wasn't any creative direction to go forward with Bob Holly after that angle. The angle was mostly used to get DiBiase and Rhodes over, thus starting the whole legacy storyline that blossomed with Randy Orton. And Cody's career certainly blossomed, but not Ted so much. But that's another story for another day. But I think it was to move along Cody and Ted more so than to do anything with Bob. So anyways, Bob Holly, from his humble beginnings, I think he started out in Smoky Mountain Wrestling as Hollywood Bob Holly. That's my earliest memory of him, and I went back and watched it. I wasn't watching until 95, and this is like late 93, early 94 I'm talking about. Hollywood Bob Holly. He had the pink long singlet, like Bret Hart and his pink singlet, and he had long blonde hair, and he's basically a stud with a name like Hollywood Bob Holly. They should have kept that, because instead they went for the geeky, nerdy, goofy-ass race car driver gimmick, and the name is one of the worst. You would have thought he was wrestling in WWE in 2010. Thurman Sparky Plug. Thurman Plug. How am I supposed to take you guys seriously with a name like Thurman? Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad name. Not here to knock on names, but come on. You're going to come up with wrestling names, you got to make them more conniving, I guess. Make them sound like, they can sound like their name has a lot of meaning to it, and something threatening, I guess. I can't think of a better word at the moment. So anyways, yeah, his debut actually came on WWF TV at the 1994 Royal Rumble. They had vignettes for Thurman Sparky Plug. He was, from Talladega, Alabama, where a lot of NASCAR races happen. I guess it's NASCAR country down there. And, there were vignettes of him speeding down the lane in his race car and saying, "I'm coming to the World Wrestling Federation, get ready." Something simple like that. They did a lot with those silly gimmicks back then. Now, Sparky Plug was a replacement for the 1-2-3 Kid in the 1994 Royal Rumble. The Kid was actually in a match at a house show at the Garden, Madison Square Garden, earlier in the week. And I think he suffered a knee injury of some sort. Whether it was in that match with Marty Jannetty where they won the tag titles and then lost them back to the Quebecers, or they had another Royal Rumble, like a 20-man Rumble, at a house show. And they did those Rumbles at house shows, so all the Rumbles you see recorded in history, that's not all of them. There were a few they did at house shows, which I'm not going to get into now, but go look it up. Maybe there's some found footage somewhere, but it's definitely on some websites like an Angel Fire or something. Archived. So, he lasted in that Rumble for like a good 20, 25 minutes, surprisingly. They kept a lot of those guys in until the ring got full that year. And after that, he was supposed to be in that infamous 10-man tag at WrestleMania 10 that ended up getting canceled due to time constraints. He just kind of floundered around, mostly on Superstars Wrestling Challenge. It wasn't until the 1995 Royal Rumble where he and the 1-2-3 Kid, they actually teamed up together. They were replacements in that tournament for the Smoking Guns. I think either Billy or Bart got injured, so Holly and the Kid replaced them, and they made it to the finals where they faced off and defeated $1 Million Corporation members Bam Bam Bigelow and Tatanka. Now, while the victory was exciting for Holly and the Kid, they only held it for 24 hours. That reign only lasted one day, one night. And then they lost it to the Smoking Guns the next night on Raw. You'd think a babyface, that would actually be a good heel turn angle. You know, they're pissed off that they only got 24 hours with the belts. Here the Guns come back, swoop right in, and take the belts right out from under the rug from them. Now that match with Holly and Kid against Bigelow and Tatanka, what happened afterwards with the losers of that contest, well, one of them, anyways, the people who lost, overshadowed the victory for the champs. Bam Bam Bigelow was confronted by Lawrence Taylor, or he was approached by Lawrence Taylor, who was shaking his hand, sorry you didn't win the match, but I just want to congratulate you for a job well done. Bigelow, I think, shoved Lawrence Taylor, who was sitting in front row in Tampa at the Rumble, just like that, knocked his glasses off, and then Taylor got all aggressive like this, rightfully so, and that led to the whole Bam Bam Lawrence Taylor main event of WrestleMania 11. So that kind of overshadowed the tag title victory in of itself, and so you could tell they weren't going to do anything in the tag team division with Holly and the Kid. They were just bodies, extra filler talent. They were supposed to be in the Rumble, but the Guns were in the Rumble, and then what happened the next night on Raw? They lost the belts. So that's that. And then Holly went back to kind of floundering around again. He'd have matches against guys like Hakushi, Jean-Pierre Lafitte, Isaac Yankem, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. I remember Hunter's pay-per-view debut, SummerSlam 95. Holly did the job for him. So Holly did the JOB on the PPV to the HHH. And he did it to many other people, too. He entered the King of the Ring and then didn't get very far with that. He had a very impressive run in the 1996 Royal Rumble, lasting 40 minutes, I want to say. Him and Hunter both. And he came in at number 5. Got eliminated like 3/4 of the way through the Rumble. Pardon me. So again, Holly's mostly kind of floundering in the lower card here. Changed up his gear a little bit. He had the check. I liked his gear as... then he finally changed his name to Bob Sparkplug Holly. So Bob Holly is more respectable than Thurman Plug, but he retained the Sparkplug name. Now we're going to fast forward a lot because he was still stuck in the Sparkplug gimmick till about late 97 or early 98. They had the whole NWA reformation angle in the winter of 98. Jim Cornette had his own NWA stable, which obviously was very unsuccessful given the time period they were trying to present it. This is old school versus new school. The Attitude Era was already booming. Or actually, it kind of started out already, and it was already in that boom period. And they're bringing in this wrestling from a bygone era, so it really didn't make sense to have it there time-wise. They could have waited and done this. This would have been a good Ruthless Aggression thing, but that's just my opinion on it. So anyways, we had this NWA stable. Jim Cornette had Jeff Jarrett as its NWA World North American Champion. Barry Windham, because he'd been the NWA for a long time, so he left the new Blackjacks. Then you had a tag team of the new Midnight Express, not the originals. This is actually the third incarnation. Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton were the first. Stan Lane then replaced Condrey. That's the legendary, the second incarnation's the most legendary one with Lane and Eaton. Now we have Bombastic Bob Holly and Bodacious Bart Gunn as the new Midnight Express, and then subsequently became the NWA North American Tag Team Champions. Or just World Tag Team Champions, sorry. North American Champion was Jeff Jarrett. So they won those tag titles the night after WrestleMania 14. They were in that Battle Royal for number 1 contendership, and the LOD 2000 returned and made a grand return and won the match. But Bombastic Bob and Bodacious Bart, oof, those names sound so bad. Neither of those guys were really ladies' men. They were two uncharismatic guys. Bart was probably like the Marty Jannetty of the Smoking Guns, while Billy was the Shawn Michaels. Bob struggled a lot with charisma and promos at that time, so neither one were great talkers, so I'm glad they had Cornette. They just lacked a lot of charisma. There wasn't a lot about them other than, maybe the way they looked. Other than the way they looked, there wasn't much else about the new Midnight Express that was so striking that you had to go and watch these guys. At least for me, as a young kid, and then still watching it, they still remained unimpressive. They were just kind of dull and bland and blah. That's it. Even the Rock and Roll Express did better, and that was the original Rock and Roll Express, and they were in that NWA stable originally. That's Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, for what it's worth. Now, fast forward to like June, July, August, summer of '98. The NWA stable is done. Jeff Jarrett's already reverted back to his original Double J gimmick. Barry Windham left the company. So yeah, they actually went to NWA, whatever regional territory was promoting them at the time, and they lost their NWA World Tag titles. So that was the end of Bodacious Bart and Bombastic Bob. Now, Al Snow was able to swoop him up in his Job Squad in late '98. Bob still had that long blonde hair from his Midnight Express days, but it was ridiculous because it didn't fit the Job Squad look. So he shaved it off, and then he had a blonde buzz cut. So he was just Bob Holly as 1/4 of the Job Squad. You had Al Snow, Bob Holly, Too Cold Scorpio was previously Flash Funk, the Blue Meanie, then of course Dwayne Gill later became Gilbert. So he technically had 5 members, so he was 1/5 of the Job Squad. And that's from like November '98 to February '99. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry, just got a message came up, gotta delete it. Okay. And so the Job Squad kind of fell apart as far as, Scorpio got released, Gilbert kind of doing his own thing every now and again, so he wasn't appearing on screen all the time. Blue Meanie was in his own storyline with Goldust, that stupid-ass mommy shit they were doing. I don't want to get into that. And then Al and Bob feuded over the Hardcore title. This brings me to probably my favorite match of Bob Holly's, St. Valentine's Day Massacre, 1999. It's the only time we've done that pay-per-view since. It was at the Pyramid in Memphis. I don't think that arena's around anymore. Bob goes under his original name of Bob Holly entering the match. Now, the match was supposed to be Road Dogg defending the Hardcore title against Al Snow. Road Dogg got injured and the title became vacated. It was vacant. So, it was a match to determine the new champion. They started in the ring, but it didn't last long as they made it to the back. It's 30 degrees outside, the middle of February in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, I've never been to Tennessee, so I don't know. I assume it gets cold there. Maybe not as cold as up north with us nor'easterners in the weather we typically experience. So they're outside the Pyramid battling. Bob's only got short trunks on, and Al's got his Job Squad shirt, which is all bloodied up from a brute attack, I think, the previous week on Raw. And they're fighting across the street in oncoming traffic, and there's fans that couldn't get into the arena, so they're watching it from outside, and this their only time to get on TV, I guess, when you can expect these kind of matches to happen. You wouldn't expect it as much now. Then they finally make it across the street, and they're heading towards a ravine or a lake or a pond, some body of water, and they're battling it out, in the ravine here, with what other twigs and tree branches, till finally they get to the Gulf of Mexico. That was it. I think they were near the Gulf of... No, they couldn't have been because they're in Tennessee. So it wasn't the Gulf of Mexico. Forget I said that. I'm sorry. My geography is not great, so you have to bear with me. So he punches, I think Bob knocks Al into the lake. He throws him in, just like this. Al comes back, and he throws him back in, so they both get wet, and it's fucking 30 degrees out. It's frigid. And then Bob finds a fence that you can roll up, and he rolls up Al in this fence to pin him, so Al can't get his shoulders up. 1, 2, 3, we have a brand new Hardcore champion. Ding, ding, ding. And Bob is using the Job Squad's original music, which was called Armed and Rambunctious. Go look it up, listen to it on YouTube. It's a great tune. It starts great, and at the end, just gets a little too crazy. It's just a lot of guitar riffs, but it starts great at the beginning. At the end, it's kind of disappointing, if you want my critique on the song. That's just a little sound bit from it, coming from me. So, Bob runs back. Back then, when you won the Hardcore title outside of the ring, let alone outside the arena, you had to run back to the ring to retrieve the title so the ref could properly raise your hand. So they kept that part of tradition alive, which I liked. They didn't bring the belt with them, which would have been more convenient, but I guess they were trying to keep in tradition there for what it's worth. And Al was grabbing onto this fence that he's tied up in and is like, "Get me out of here! God damn it!" So, Bob got a new name after that match. He then became Hardcore Holly, which is his best character to date. And Hardcore Holly saved his career. He wouldn't have gotten far still as Sparky Plug or Bombastic Bob. So, going forward, we have Hardcore Holly, and he has that music. He has Slow Death, which Crash Holly later used. Well, go listen to it if you want to. I'm not going to keep singing to you. So Bob is now defending his hardcore title. He has a lot of defenses here and there, including one against Mr. Ass, Billy Gunn, whom he loses it to. And that's a weird storyline because the Outlaws were seeking out into singles runs come winter of '99, heading into the spring. We didn't know they were going to break up yet, but they eventually did. So Road Dogg was supposed to be in the hardcore title picture. Mr. Ass was supposed to be in the Intercontinental title picture. Vince Russo's booking these shows. What does he do? He swaps the two. So, March 15th, 1999 on Raw, I was vacationing in La Jolla, California with family. I remember watching in the hotel room with my brother. We had a room to ourselves, lucky us. So, I remember Mr. Ass defeated Hardcore Holly to win the hardcore title. Seemed out of place because he was already engaged in the other feud. Meanwhile, Road Dogg defeated Val Venus to win the Intercontinental title. So, I know it's a swerve, and the WWE's big on swerves now, but Vince Russo always did swerves that didn't make sense. At least what WWE does now makes sense. So, this was a swerve that almost didn't need to happen, but it did, and it's fine. It wouldn't have made WrestleMania 15 any better, which leads me to now, WrestleMania 15, not one of the greatest of all time, but Austin and Rock saved the show. Triple threat match for the hardcore title. Mr. Ass defends against Hardcore Holly and Al Snow. A 7.5 minute long match. Bob Holly regains his belt by hook or by crook. Walks away as the champ, and he's champ again for like another month. Mr. Ass is then done with the hardcore title picture, and he resumes his feud with Al Snow, and I think he steals head, at which point Al Snow has to go and look for a severed deer head named Pierre. Now, Pierre was a deer. It's one of those deers that people, when they go hunting, they put the deer on their wall, so the deer head's sticking out, and that's exactly who Pierre was. That was so crazy, but crazy in the funniest way. It's the funniest shit ever. I remember Pierre. Because Head eventually got he got a nail spiked in his head from Prince Albert and Draws. That happened later on this summer. Head's been through a lot. Poor mannequin, poor guy, whatever you want to call it. So, Al and Bob have a rematch from St. Valentine's Day Massacre at Backlash 99. Backlash in your house. The very last in your house, if you will. And Al actually wins that match. I think he does the snowplow on a dumpster full of trash. And there was a bunch of trash in white trash bags, and Jerry Lawler makes a very funny comment in that match. See, I always knew Al Snow was white trash. How apropos. I probably could have come up with that on the spot, but I didn't. And then they have a match which a lot of people would like to forget because of where it took place, at Over the Edge. I'm not going to get into great detail about that pay-per-view, where Al retains his belt against Bob because Bob actually stole Head after Backlash. He's like, I won't give you Head back until I get my rematch, pal. Bob becomes a hard ass here. And this is around the time where Bob kind of becomes a bully backstage. I think there was a fight going on between Bob Holly and Steve Blackman, or it might have been Bob Holly and Bradshaw, or it might have been Steve Blackman and Bradshaw. No, those three were legit tough guys. And Bradshaw and Bob Holly were big bullies backstage throughout the majority of their career. Always pushing and shoving people and, not always saying nice things. If you ever dealt with a bully in high school, you know exactly what it's like. And Steve Blackman was just a legit tough guy fighter. So if you wronged any of those guys in any capacity backstage, or if you looked them the wrong way, they'll start a fight with you just like that, beat your ass. And, there's a lot of that happened just because of, they're wrestlers and they have that mentality, sadly, and they don't think to handle conflicts just by talking it out. I don't have a great story to share with you on that, but there's a bunch of message boards, dirt sheets that can share that kind of info with you. So anyways, Bob's done with the hardcore title picture for a little while. He'll get back into it, and then he feuds with Big Show and Kane, calling himself the Big Shot because he thinks he's a super heavyweight, which leads to Crash Holly, his storyline cousin, Michael Lockwood, the late, great Michael Lockwood, entering WWF. And, yeah, they want to take on super heavyweights. Kane, Big Show, Viscera, Rikishi. There was a match in Armageddon in 99. The Holly cousins took on Viscera and Rikishi. I don't really remember what happened there. It was kind of a crappy, dull match. Then we get back to the hardcore title picture. Crash wins the belt and establishes the 24/7 rule. That belt is defended 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You could be taking a nap in your bedroom and someone could come pin you. 1, 2, 3, new champion. In a hotel room of all places. Now we know how Crash Holly escaped time and time again as the Houdini of hardcore from the Mean Street Posse, whether it was in his hotel room having breakfast, the laundromat, the airport, I think that was in Newark, New Jersey, and the circus of all places. The Posse were dressed as clowns, if you can believe that. Bob obviously was in contention, so that led to that melee at WrestleMania 2000, the 15-minute hardcore title battle royal. Now, it wasn't a battle royal where you throw your opponent over the top rope, both feet touch the floor. I covered this match a little bit in the WrestleMania 2000 rewriting video, so I won't go into a lot of detail. But the ending was botched because the timing was off. Crash was supposed to walk out and retain. Bob hits Crash with the candy jar over the head, just as Crash pinned Taz to win the hardcore title back again, with like 5 seconds left. 1, 2, 3. Notice no sound effect. The ref didn't go all the way down for the 3. So 1, 2, 3. Ding, ding, ding. It was the weirdest, screwiest ref count I've ever seen. Howard Finkel even is confused himself. Ladies and gentlemen, the time limit has expired. Your winner and new World Wrestling Federation Hardcore Champion, Hardcore Holly? Question mark. Then he celebrates, and there's this iconic picture of him on the ring post with the belt, with the Anaheim Mighty Ducks logo in the back, because WrestleMania was in Anaheim, California that year. And he walks out, and he's proud of it, even though he wasn't booked to win the match. So the ending did not go as planned, and that happens sometimes in wrestling. You just have to improvise a little bit. So not everything that's supposed to be staged happens, like so. Now, if you stayed up a little bit later past the main event, when WrestleMania is over, they had like a post-show or whatever. Michael Cole, in his denim attire, is interviewing... No, he was all dressed up for Mania. He was in his tuxedo. His denim attire he wore a lot for weekly shows, but always got dressed up for pay-per-view. Especially WrestleMania, you have to be dressed up if you're an announcer. Michael Cole interviews him and asks what he thinks about that controversial win. Crash wants to defend the belt. Bob says, Crash wants to defend the belt 24/7. Well, I'm going to do it 48-14. You got any more questions, you little shithead? Ooh. And then JR, we cut back to JR and the King, sitting at ringside with a broken table. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to apologize for those remarks from Hardcore Holly there. You know, it's very uncalled for what he did. But Bob was just being himself in that promo there. You know, he didn't like that Cole was instigating a question that he didn't want him to ask. And he was asking him a question that he didn't want asked in the first place, and it looks like he was instigating some sort of controversy there. He didn't really win the match. It was just a screwy finish, and I think Bob might have taken a little offense to it. So that's my take on it anyways. Next big thing for Bob Holly, we're going to fast forward a little bit. We go now to September 2002. He's in a match on SmackDown with Brock Lesnar. A lot of reports on this one, but the one I remember best is Bob sandbagged a powerbomb, which ended up in a broken neck. And sandbagging is when you're the recipient of the move and you're not pulling your weight in the move. So when you go down for a powerbomb, the guy picks you up, but the other guy has to make it so that he lands right on his back, not crooked on his neck or head or neck like Bob did. So Bob landed awkwardly. He didn't put up all his weight, and he's going to blame Brock for that, obviously. Bob was out for a good year and 2 months with a broken neck, so he missed a lot of 2003. Which leads me to the Royal Rumble of 2004, where this storyline gets reintroduced to us. Bob actually returned that Survivor Series and got himself disqualified early on in the traditional Survivor Series match because he beat up Brock too much. And this was the only time Bob ever got a world title shot. This Brock was WWE champion, was about to leave the company in like 3 months after this. So we get to the Rumble, and it's this 6-minute match. Bob was just filler, and it turned out to be a big joke and a half. After 6 minutes, Brock hits the F5 and beats him cleanly. Bob should have gotten a phantom run, if you ask me. Even a run that lasted 24, 48 hours, and then could have given it right back to Brock. But I guess they knew Eddie was going to be the one to take the belt, so fans actually didn't bother to get behind Bob Holly. I did. I was only 14 going on 15 at the time, and, you know, I hated Brock Lesnar. I just thought he was a complete dick, complete asshole of a heel, the way he beat up Shannon Moore every week and made Chris Benoit lose consciousness. He was just a cowardly heel, and you don't normally see a cowardly Brock Lesnar. He's a tough guy, but he tried in a comedic role. And he didn't have Paul Heyman. Heyman was the GM, but Heyman wasn't his mouthpiece. So he had Brock on promos a lot, which a little bit of a struggle to get through listening to because he's not a great talker, but that's Brock. Bob actually got better on promos. Did this one vignette, is like, Brock, you took away a year of my career. When I come back, I'm going to make sure I break your neck. It was so convincing in the way he said it, and I thought he was on the path to something good here. And also, it was like his 10th anniversary with the company, so he should have had some just due. At least give him a run with the Intercontinental or United States title, which they could have done at the very least. And then instead he just becomes filler again, till they bring him over to ECW, and he's involved in... He had a great match September of 2006 against Rob Van Dam, where he cut himself on the table, Bob did, and required 14 stitches due to a laceration on his back. Oh, that spot was sick. That's probably the best match on ECW on Sci-Fi in its entirety, to be honest. Then we get to Extreme Elimination Chamber at December to Dismember, and Bob replaces Sabu, but that match is so crappy and shitty, I'm not even going to go into great detail. Then finally we get to the Cody Rhodes storyline. It was a respect feud, kind of like what they did with Carlito and Ric Flair earlier in 2007. Bob Holly and Cody Rhodes have a match. It kind of goes back to when Randy Orton debuted. Bob Holly was the one that kicked Orton's ass, but Orton always beat him. And then eventually he went on to respect him. He shook his hand and said, "Welcome to the WWF, kid. Welcome to WWE, kid." It was still WWF when Randy Orton debuted. Like 2 weeks left of it being so. So Cody comes in. They have like 3 matches consecutively on Raw, 3 consecutive weeks. Finally, Cody goes to shake his hand, and he earns his respect, and they become tag team partners, just like that. The logic isn't great, because you would have thought Cody wanted to branch out a little bit more, but Cody was nowhere near ready for superstardom. Not the level he's at now, or the level he was when he was Intercontinental Champion. But a brand new Cody Rhodes in his green and yellow John Deere trunks. Oh my God. You had a lot to learn back then, kid. So December the 10th of 2007, Raw's 15th anniversary, that was in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I couldn't go to it that night for whatever reason. Bob and Cody win the World Tag Titles for the first and only time from Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch, and Dusty Rhodes is at ringside because all the legends come back for these monumental Raw anniversaries. You don't see much legend stuff now as you once did. Maybe that was more when Vince was in charge. So Triple H, I think, wants to do away with that. So Dusty was there because his son won his first piece of gold in WWE. It wasn't a major singles title, but be that as it may. And Bob got his 3rd World Tag title. I believe that was his 3rd, because first was with 1-2-3 Kid, then he won it with Crash Holly for like 2 weeks in the fall of 99. Then this reign lasted 202 days, December of 07 to June of 08. Then I already talked about how it all ended, and that was really it for Bob. And I feel bad, because he's a good guy. I met him, and deep down he seemed nice. One thing I forgot to talk about was his time on Tough Enough. He was the best coach, I thought, on Tough Enough. Now, there's going to be that controversy with Matt Cappotelli. I'm talking about Tough Enough 2. Let's get Tough Enough 3 out of the way real quick. He was a guest on Tough Enough 3 because they brought back all the trainers in one episode to have a match with like the five finalists at the time. Seemed traditional that they did that in the early Tough Enough seasons. So Matt Cappotelli got his ass kicked, but then he kind of cried and bitched about it. I think Matt was kind of in the wrong here, because you're in the WWE and you need to toughen up. Bob may have taken a few more liberties than he should have. Maybe he should have, lay off him a little bit, but I don't think it was the worst thing that ever happened. But the way MTV produced it was like you're feeling more sorry for Cappotelli than you are feeling good that Holly did what he did. So I'm probably in the minority. And it's weird looking at this. Cappotelli unfortunately died. He suffered a brain tumor not long after he won Tough Enough, a few years after, and had to end his wrestling career very prematurely. Seemed like a good guy at heart. And Matt Cappotelli was doing well in OVW, and then the brain tumor happened, and he had to lay off wrestling after that, and then unfortunately passed away. He's no longer with us. But in that moment, Matt should have learned to toughen up, and sad that they just filmed so much footage of him crying and acting all whiny about it. And even some of the contestants, like Jonah and Eric and those guys, were like, yeah, Matt should kind of toughen up a little bit. Maybe John. This was John Morrison's season that he won, John Hennigan. Now, let's go back to Tough Enough 2. Bob was one of the coaches. He was like in the Bill DeMott role before Bill DeMott took over on Tough Enough 3. So he was there every week for 13 weeks they do these shows, film these 13 episodes worth. So Bob had a great relationship with the cast, and he was tough on them. He's strict but fair. It's the strict but fair guy, which, I don't mind people being like that. It's a good way to be. But he had this funny relationship with one contestant by the name of Hawk. And I'm not talking about Michael Hegstrand from the Legion of Doom, but this guy's name is Hawk Yunkins, who I believe became an actor and an MMA fighter post-Tough Enough. He didn't want to go back to wrestling. I found him on Facebook, and we reconnected because I'm a fan, and I like to reach out to anybody involved in pro wrestling in any capacity. Hawk was a very different character, to say the least. He had a very unique personality in that he did crazy things that people might deem crazy. Like he jumped in the water at Caesar's Palace to prove that he wanted the contract during the casting special, during the auditions. He took his shirt off and jumped in the water. I think he did it twice. And then he would always say things that kind of came out of left field here and there, and you had to watch Tough Enough too. Watch Hawk, and you'll see. And Bob just kind of picked on him because he was kind of an easy target, but also trying to toughen him up too. And he liked Hawk, though Bob would have never said it. And Hawk had a emotional breakdown on the South Africa trip and decided to quit. And Bob was disappointed he didn't go to South Africa with the rest of them. Otherwise, Hawk wouldn't have left. So I forgot to include that. And I think after that, that covers everything about Bob Holly we need to know now. And then I met him in 2015, and that's that. So if you have any stories you want to share on Bob Holly, please do. Always enjoy to hear people's comments and reactions, even if you disagree with what I'm saying. And this has been another great edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling, and until next time, everybody, bye-bye.